And hello! Welcome back to the channel. If you are new around here, hi, how are you? My name is Vivian Asimos. I'm a researcher and a writer, and today we are going over the fiction books that I read in June and July. Now, if you are new to the fiction roundups, which I've only done one before, so there might be quite a few of you that are new to these, a quick couple of notes. The one of which is that I tend to do 2 months at a time because I am not one of those people that can read like 1,000 books in a year. It's just not me, and it just seems silly to do a reading roundup every month where it's like 2 books. I'd rather just do it a little bit more, but not too hefty. So I think 2 months is pretty decent. The other thing to note is that I will be having my star reviews. My star reviews are not a reflection on how good I think the writer is. Very often I will read a book that I think is very well done. It's very well constructed. The writing is really nice. It just didn't vibe with me. That's it. There is going to be one of those on this list that a lot of people really, really love. I can see why people really love it, but it wasn't my thing. So this is not a reflection on that by any means. If I have a low review of a book that you really love, I don't think it's bad on the book. It just means I didn't personally like it. My rating system is very simple. It is, did I like the book? If I loved it, it's 5. If I liked it, it's 4. If I thought it was okay, it's 3, and so on and so on. That is simply it. It is not a reflection of anything else. So this particular 2-month period of June and July was quite different for me for a couple of reasons. One of which is that June, I didn't really get a lot of reading done. I read one book and it took a very long time because I started it and then stopped it and then started it again. Basically, I was really ill in June. I went on holiday at the beginning and then I got COVID. It hit me really bad and I had that brain fatigue thing for a couple of weeks. And so reading was not a really high interest to me. I played a lot of Fae Farm instead. So I did not get a lot of reading done. However, I did manage one book in June, and that is A Fever of the Blood by Oscar de Muriel. Now, this is the second book in the Frey and McGray series. I read the first one in my previous fiction recap, so if you're interested in what the series is all about and what I felt about the first one, you can go check out that video. It's a sequel to Strings of Murder, so this is the second book in the series, and I won't get too into it because some of it includes some like series spoilers, including ones from the first book. Even though it's just the second book, there is already that need to have read the first one, so I don't really want to spoil anything if you're interested in going back to read the first one. But the one thing that I will say is that the kind of monster of the week for this one is witches. I gave this one a bit of a lower score than the first one simply because it felt like a second book in a series. And if you've read a lot of kind of more detailed series, you'll know kind of what I mean. The first one is always an introduction to characters and the story's a little bit more contained. The second one tends to start the wider expanse of the world, and so things don't get really tied up as well. It doesn't feel like it's its own cohesive story in the same way. It feels like, oh, okay, this is a series. Like, we now know this is a series. That's how it felt. And that's not necessarily a knock against it. It is the second book in a series that is quite long running. I think there's like 8 or 9 books, something like that. I mean, obviously it's going to have that feel. That's what it was. It does mean that the mystery element to me wasn't quite as developed or as good, but it was fun. This series is just a lot of fun to me. It's kind of lighthearted. It's not the most intensive book in the world. It's also not the best, most elaborate writing in the world, but the stories are kind of fun and it's enjoyable. It's a nice little romp. So if you like a nice little romp through like Gaslamp, Edinburgh, then have fun. So at the beginning of July, I went and gathered a load of horror novels because nothing says summer like horror novels. But no, I've been wanting to read a lot more horror for a while. I was wanting to get new input. I've been reading a lot of mystery novels, particularly like really classic mystery novels. And so I wanted kind of a change, but nothing too drastically different. And I think horror really fits that stamp. So I went on a bit of a book buying spree at the beginning of July. So July, I read another 4 books, and all of them came from this gathering of horror novels. So strap in for a spooky July. Although, I think A Fever of the Blood would probably also fit at least a spooky vibe. This first one that I read was Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I do not have a hard copy of this because I grabbed it from the library, but I will obviously have my cover up here. Mexican Gothic follows Noemi, who is a young socialite in Mexico City, but gets called to the countryside when her cousin's recent marriage is suddenly in question. Her cousin had written a very disturbing and questionable letter to Noemi's father, whose worry about the situation causes him to send Noemi to go and sort it out, whatever might be happening. I quite liked this book. I really enjoyed it. I don't know whether I was swayed by Noemi. She was a flawed character, like I think the best characters are, but she wanted to be an anthropologist, and I'm an anthropologist, and so I definitely connected to that. There was references to some of the books that she was reading that were really classic anthropology literature. Most notably, while she was there, she was reading E. Evans Pritchard's Witchcraft, Magic, and Oracles Among the Azandi. It was that one, which is like a classic anthropology book. It's one of the like 101 books that you read when you're first embarking on anthropology. And so I enjoyed those references. I do think they kind of were just references. I feel like there were elements of Evans Pritchard work that would actually have tied in really well to the story. I don't know whether Silvia Moreno Garcia has read Evans Pritchard, how long it has been since they have read Evans Pritchard, but I do think that maybe some more direct references would have been really interesting, but also then it might have started reading like a nonfiction book. So I do understand why that might have not been the optimum choice. There are some really good scary horror themes. I really love when horror dips into real world horror, but in a way that isn't too real world, which I think is what this worked with. There were definitely issues of violence against women, patriarchy, capitalism, white supremacy, which are all real horrors in the world, but this was presented in a way that was both real and not real at the same time, and I think it helped to lend a heavier lens to what you're reading when you know that, you know, white supremacists actually exist in the world and things like that. There is a little bit of a content warning if you are interested in this for the above themes, if any of really detailed discussions of these kinds of things would trigger you, as well as, like I said, violence against women and rape. I think it was a really good horror approach. It had popped up as like a cosmic horror book. I think it's probably more folk horror, but I'm not an expert in the intricate differences between these genres, but that's probably whereabout I would pin it. I really liked the questionings of reality versus fiction, what the point of views are, the natural versus supernatural. I think these are all really interesting conversations to have, particularly in the genre of horror. So yeah, I really loved this one. Liked it a lot. Definitely recommend. So the next one that I read was Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, and again, this was a library book, so I don't have it, but this was the cover that I had for edition purposes, if that is of interest to you. Annihilation is one of the really classic horror novels. I don't know if I'm going to continue the Southern Reach trilogy or series. I don't know if it's a trilogy that this is the first book of. I think I've gotten my fill. I'm kind of happy to leave it as that. I did like this book, but it was an odd one. The plot of the book is that there is this thing called Area Zero, which is this strange magical location in the world which creatures and plants are really odd and different and seemingly unnatural. The government has sent 11 exploration groups in of different scientists, each ending in some kind of strange or questionable result. The book Annihilation follows the most recent team, one that is of all women, And it is told from the point of view of the biologist of the group. The biologist as a character was really interesting, and I think, I mean, I'm not autistic, but I think she was probably a good representation of autism. Although I will leave that to the autistic people to decide how accurate it feels to them. But as I was reading it, I was reminded of a lot of my autistic friends. I was like, oh yeah, this feels like them. So I think that is something really nice if that's something that you're looking for. It was a very short book, so I don't want to give more information about the book or really any of my thoughts because it was really, really quick. I think I read it in like 2 days. It's a weird one because, to be honest, I don't really know what happened. Like, if I were to give a spoiler full recap of this, I don't really know what I would say, except for like some of the things that she encounters. It just kind of felt like, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but it really just felt like an exploration rather than plot, if that makes any sense. And again, I don't mean it in a bad way. I did enjoy this book. I don't mean that as a knock against it, but it makes it interesting to think about and recall and try to talk about it. Because you do have that in the back of your head of being like, well, but what exactly happened? I also have kind of a weird relationship with horror that I should probably mention at this point. So when I was reading this, one of the days that I was reading this, I was going out to meet a friend for a writing day session, and I mentioned that I was reading Annihilation, and my friend had read Annihilation and asked like, oh yeah, it's like you can only read like 2 or 3 pages at a time because it's really bad and like the horror really gets to you. And I was like, I don't know, I'm reading like 50, 70 pages. Like I breezed through it. I didn't really feel whatever horror I think was supposed to be at it. I could tell that it was horror. And I think this is a really important dimension because a future book that I read in this month, I have similar feelings of, but I don't know where the horror is supposed to be for it. Well, this one, I know what it's supposed to be. I could see it. It just didn't affect me in that way. So maybe I'm a bad judge of like the horror rating for some of these books, but I did really enjoy it. I thought it was an interesting story, and I think it was very short, but it was so much the perfect length. Like if it was any longer or any shorter, there would have been a problem. But it was so a perfect length. Speaking of books that didn't really feel like much horror, the next book I read was A House at the Bottom of a Lake by Josh Malerman. This one, another short book, as you can tell. I think this particular copy, this one was only 116 pages. I mean, the print is fairly tiny, but not massively so, because there seems to be a lot of space between the lines as well. So I would have to count to see how many words per page it roughly is. But this one was another really quick one. This one I think I read in 2 days. I think Annihilation might have taken me 3 or 4, but this one I read in 2 days. And so anyway, I should get to the plot before I wrap it up. So this is about Amelia and Josh, both who are teenagers on their first date. They're canoeing through some lakes that are kind of semi-interconnected. In one secluded lake, they discover a house at the bottom of a lake, obviously. And what is kind of creepy about this house is that all of its furnishings, fixtures, the little bits and bobs that are in the house, it looks like it's still being lived in almost like that. It doesn't look abandoned. And also everything is still like where it should be. So like things aren't floating. There was like a salt shaker, for example, on the counter, and it's like on the counter. It's not like floating through the water. So that's the gist of the book. I mean, like I said, it's really short. That's what the book is. So I think this was probably shorter than Annihilation. It at least was a quicker read for me. Again, it's hard to say about the specifics. It has elements of the uncanny, strange, the unexpected, but really, I don't think I would pin this as a horror novel. If I was like compiling a list of horror novels, regardless of how I felt about them, I probably wouldn't actually put this on the list. I pinned it more as a romance novel. Like, it felt like I was reading an uncanny, spooky romance novel. Romance novels are just really not my thing. So I don't know if I'm like the best judge of this, but to be honest, I just didn't really feel like it hit that horror itch that I was wanting, which is a bit disappointing because I think the premise was really interesting. The idea of this house being at the bottom of a lake with all its furnishings there and it's kind of spooky. I think that's really interesting, but it became like the story is about Amelia and Josh and them falling in love. That's what the story is. It's not really about the house. The house is a metaphor. You know, it's all that kind of shit. This one I really wasn't really feeling. So my last book I don't have any notes on because I finished it last night, so we're gonna hope that this isn't too rambly. But I just read The Gone World by Tom Sweterlich. Really hope I pronounced that right. Tom Sweterlich. So this was a book that I bought as part of my book buying spree. It popped up on a lot of the lists. When I was trying to decide which book I was going to read next, I was trying to figure out if any of the ones that I'd picked up were also like tied with mystery novels, which some of them were. And this one, again, popped up a lot. A lot of people really, really love this book. I'm very sorry for what I'm about to do. But before I get into my thoughts on it, I should explain the premise. So The Gone World is actually a kind of murder mystery start following Shannon Moss, who's an NCIS special agent. She is investigating the murder of a Navy SEAL's family, where the main suspect is the Navy SEAL himself. And it's kind of tied to a lot of discussions around government secrets and space travel and time travel. Basically, in this rendering of the world, Shannon and other NCIS special agents are able to travel forward in time in order to learn about cases that they're currently working on and then go back in time to try to then piece together the evidences that they might have missed otherwise. So one of the reasons why I thought this one would be really fascinating is that the main character is an NCIS homicide detective. My dad is actually a retired NCIS special agent. He was a cold case homicide detective. So he did work with cold cases rather than hot cases, fresh cases. Sounds so terrible. However, he did work with NCIS, so I was very familiar with some of the tics of NCIS, particularly because the main story takes place in 1997, and people didn't know what NCIS was. People really didn't know what NCIS was until the show came out. And there's a fun reference to that where she jumps to a time in the future where the show has been out and they make a joke about, oh, do you work with Gibbs? And she doesn't know what they're talking about. That definitely was something that I thought was very funny because that's definitely something that I saw actually happen in real time of people not knowing what the hell I was talking about when I mentioned my dad being an NCIS agent. And then in the future, when there was the show, me saying that my dad works for NCIS and them assuming I meant the TV show and not that he was like an actual federal agent. So that bit was kind of fun, but I think I was hoping for something that this book wasn't, which isn't the book's fault, really. And that's why, again, like I said at the beginning, my ratings do not reflect the quality of a book. If somebody said this was their favorite book, I would totally understand it. It is very well paced. I think that the story itself is really fascinating. The way that they did the twists and turns was, I think, very well executed. So it is a very well written book. If this is one of your favorite books, I totally get it and I see it and I love that for you because this is a really good book. I would agree that it is a good book. But I just did not like it. There were a lot of problems that I had with it. The first being something that, again, they couldn't, it's not really the book's fault. It's just that it wasn't what I was expecting when I went into it. This is a problem that I think I have with a lot of double genre novels where one of the genres is mystery. Any book where it is mystery plus some other genre, I find that the mystery suffers. And as somebody who is currently writing a double genre book where mystery is one of them, I really hope this isn't the case for mine, but it might be. Someone might find this as a fault, and that's totally understandable. But yeah, I just felt like the mystery part of this wasn't really existing. Now, maybe that's because the writer wasn't intending for it to be a double genre, but it was sold to me as a double genre, which, again, isn't the writer's fault if that's not what they were intending when they were writing it. However, that's how I approached the book, and therefore was kind of disappointed in the mystery side. So now let's talk about the horror side. This is one of the books, like A House at the Bottom of a Lake, where I do not know where the horror was supposed to be. In both of these books, I do not understand where the horror was supposed to be. With A House at the Bottom of the Lake, I guess it was supposed to be the uncanniness, but that wasn't really horror, that was uncanny. Those are two slightly different things. With Gone World, I mean, I just don't really understand where the horror was supposed to be. There's an element of kind of the end of the world coming. It could have been that, but it didn't really feel like it to me. Again, maybe this is an Annihilation thing where other people feel it. I just don't feel it, and so that's where I'm missing. But with Annihilation, I saw where the horror was. I didn't feel the horror, but I saw it and I understood it. Here, I really don't see it. The other thing that it might be is just that there's just a lot of violence and gore in this book. Like, a lot. And I don't know whether that was supposed to be the horror. Like, it's horror in, like, a Saw film kind of way, rather than horror in a Silence of the Lambs kind of way. And I prefer a Silence of the Lambs to a Saw. So maybe that's what was going on, and it was just like, oh, how terribly violent everything is. Maybe that was what it was. Like I said, I just couldn't find it. And I think part of this is also that the writer, from what I understand, and I might be wrong, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the writer is a man. And the main character of the book is a woman. And now I have read books by men where the main character is a woman that nails it. That really is so good. I think Annihilation is a really good example of this. Again, I haven't really looked into Jeff Vandermeer, so I'm assuming that he identifies as male. If I am wrong, please do let me know. The biologist is a woman, identifies as a woman. That book is so good. That book really portrays this woman in such a realistic way. It so nails it. This one, there are elements of it that are really good. Like, for most of the book, I was like, yeah, this guy can write a woman, right? I was very impressed with it. However, there was a really important element that I think he missed, and this is in regards to violence against women. But women and people who have been socialized as female understand often that there are worse things in the world than dying. And I think that's something that he really missed. There's a point where she's encountering one of the bad guys, and her fear is death. And when I was reading it, my fear was not death. My fear was something my expectation of what was going to happen in that scene was really different than hers. And I think it's that he might not have realized that that's where our brain goes. That's what our worry and our concern is, not death. That oftentimes death is actually preferable. So anyway, I'm not going to linger on it, but that was definitely an element of my question about this. But anyway, that's the Gone World. That was my thoughts on it. It did make me kind of want to write a true crime novel based off of my dad's cases, kind of doing a semi-interview along with digging through his case files and stuff like that. I would be really fascinated by it, which maybe I'll do. Maybe I'll do in the future. Not right now. I have too much on my plate right now. But maybe in the future, that's something that I would do. It did make me want to do that. That's it. Those are the books that I read in June and July. As I said, it's a little bit of a shorter stack this time around because I didn't really read much in June. Next time, I'm probably going to have another round of horror novels, but I think I'm going to reintroduce a bit of thriller as well as just classic mystery again, kind of scattered throughout. I have to make my way through all the Agatha Christie still, so that might come back into play every so often. And I would be interested in reading a true crime novel just to get an idea of how I would be able to structure something like that, because I'm already thinking about maybe writing that book, because that's what my brain does. So if you have any recommendations for true crime books kind of similar to what I was describing, please do let me know. I would love to read them and get an idea of how I could approach this. Do I need to plug anything? Yes! So you can pre-order my book, Cosplay and the Dressing of Identity, from Reaction Books. That's Reaction with a K. I've got a link in the description to go pre-order now. Pre-orders really, really do help me. So that would be really lovely if that's of interest to you to go and check that out. It's an anthropological study of cosplay. So if you are interested in the nerd scene and studies of nerddom and popular culture, or you are interested in cosplay, or you have someone in your life interested in cosplay, this is a really great way to understand them a bit better. So go pre-order Cosplay and the Dressing of Identity down below. I have a podcast called I'm a Fan of That. Again, fandom, all related. We have a really big announcement coming up in September, so if that's of interest to you, go follow us on social media, go subscribe to the podcast in order to learn more, or go listen to the podcast, see if you want to subscribe and all that kind of stuff. If you like me, you'll probably like the podcast, so I hope you like me. You can go check out my other channel, Incidental Mythology, which is a video essay channel where I delve into popular culture from the perspective of a mythographer, as an anthropologist of mythology, which is what I am. And that's it. Those are all the things to go check out and do. A load of them are in the description below. I also have this in a playlist with book recaps of fiction books, so you can go check those out. And then in the intervening months from doing these, I am going to be doing research recaps and research roundups. I did one on mythology and tabletop role-playing games previously. My next one will probably be a more general one on myth studies. That's what the plan is. So you can look forward to that. In the meantime, I do vlogs and let you know about all the things going on in my life. So that's everything. Go do all the YouTube stuff. Go check out all the things. Comment what books you're reading this month. If you've got a really good horror suggestion, please let me know. Now that you can get a general idea of the kind of stuff that I like. I am still learning the kind of stuff that I like. Let me know your thoughts on some of the books that I read, if you've read them. Give me your suggestions for future readings. Like I said, if you've got any true crime interests, please let me know, because I'm considering dabbling. It'll probably be quite a while before I start doing that, because I want to clean up some stuff. I want to get the opinion of a couple of other people before I delve into it. But my dad has said that he wouldn't mind doing it, so I think that would be cool. Anyway, yeah, so comment all of your suggestions, like this video, share it with other book interest people, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!